guys, it's me, Pokemon Bear HD, and for the fourth time today, or potentially tomorrow morning after I finish work, we are annoying you with the best of the rest, Mega Beedrill Edition. And this time, I have made the team, so I will hand over the reins to Tristan to explain a little bit more about this and what mons stick out to him.
Yep. Hey guys, I'm back again, and hopefully I actually stick through this time, but you know, this process of life, you know, circle of life, Lion King status, you know. But talking about Lion King, we got the real kings of the Hive. We got Mega Beedrill, the new Hive edition tier, but we got the Mega Beedrills. Long live the king, said Scar. But you know, we're gonna go on here. The draft has finished, but what we see here is looking through these tiers. It's nothing that I'm not really surprised that people didn't grab. Like Koopa Onmon is just there. Like, you know, it's just there. Nothing too good about it. Latias is something that I mentioned about in my Weedle video. Then we have Terrakion and Tyranitar. Both of them are actually pretty dominant. I know Jarrett talked about Terrakion in the Beedrill edition. I haven't seen Tyranitar available, and I think it's because like Tyranitar here has a lot of weaknesses, and that's just an issue for it. And so I could understand why it's not drafted. But you know, Tyrantars have feelings too, you know, so let's just be considerate here. We go back to tier 2A and we see Blacephalon, which is pretty dominant. We see in some tiers, in some leagues. I understand why it wasn't drafted, such as I explained in my last time going through this. Buzzwole, you know, I'm surprised that it was drafted or it was undrafted, because not because it's not a decent mon or anything, but it's because I never see it like not drafted. So I think in all three of the tiers below it was drafted. So I'm like, this is the first time. It surprises me. So I'm like, okay. Landorus, Sandforce, of course. This is the first time I think I've seen it without it being drafted, which kind of surprised me as well, because it's like, why is Mega Beedrill the only one that didn't draft it? You know, it's like, what's wrong with it, Mega Beedrill? Explain to us. Okay, going on Starmie, I talked about that a little bit in my not my Weedle, but my Beedrill team. So be sure to check that out. I actually used it. I loved it. Volcanion is just trash. Xurkitree, we see here Xurkitree is a pretty dominant electric type, other than its speed and its coverage, but I mean, it's still something that a lot of people draft. We go down to Arcanine, which is trash, and then we see stuff like Dugtrio and Entei, which they're pretty dominant for what the typings they are. Like, Entei is completely better than Arcanine, because Arcanine probably should be placed below Silvally, to be honest, in terms of tiers. And then what we see here, we see Goodra, Gothitelle. Both of them are pretty bulky mons. Gothitelle having Shadow Tag. I'm not going to go through every mon anymore. I don't know what I've been doing. I believe this is the first time I've seen Stakataka not drafted. It might have been one other one in Weedle, maybe. But, like, that's a little bit surprising. Stakataka has its niches here and there. Then we go tier 3. What do we see here? Really nothing I didn't expect not to get drafted. Like Haxorus and Heracross are huge wall breakers that can be drafted whenever they really want. Okay, back to talk I was having in the not the Beedrill, but the Kakuna division. It is Gen 7, people. Why aren't you drafting Auroraville? It's just easy wins, boys. Easy wins. Now, what we like, why? Just why? Yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna go on with that anymore. We see Zygarde 10 and Umbreon, which are pretty reliable in what they really fill with Zygarde being a wall breaker of sorts, and Vaporeon being the bulky water that people usually look for. Then we go into Tier 3B, and we see stuff like Cofagrigus, which people usually draft often. I'm surprised to see for Ralligator. I'm like, it's not because it's a bad water type or a good water type. It's like, I feel like in a 3B, it's pretty much value for Alligator in 3B. Other than that, we look through nothing too big in Tier 3B, except when we get to near like the bottom 5 or 6 or so. It's like Seismitoad, one of the better water types in the tier. Like it has rocks. Its typing is pretty great for what it is. Its bulk is amazing. It says okay. Then we go Tentacruel, not taken. Rapid Spinner, bulk is pretty good. Rapid Spin. It's like, what's up with this? And then Serena, good grass type, good rapid spinner. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't used it well, and I know Jared hasn't used it well. Then you see like Whimsicott, which is people tend to draft it because it's like it's prankster, it's good speed, it has good stuff with it, and it's like okay. And then just Yanmega, like look who we have in the Mega Beedrill. There's one person that thinks Yanmega is fantastic, simply fantastic, and it wasn't drafted. Is it not fantastic, simply fantastic? I'll leave that one for you to But nonetheless, I'm sure everyone has their reasons for not drafting. Except for Ninetales. I'm not giving you guys an excuse for that one. I'm sorry. You guys, come on. Come on. Come on, dude. Like, okay, going on, just, Jared, I'm gonna let you just take the reins on this one. What was your Tier 1, Pond? Come on.
Okay, well, we clearly think alike a little bit here because, in Tier 1B, the first mon I decided to build this team around was Latios, and we have obviously discussed Latios because that was a mon that Tristan felt was very good and worth drafting within I believe it was his Weedle team, and I feel completely the same. It's to me almost because of the way the tiers are, it's almost a discount Latios that's very, very much close to the same as Latios in that it's the stats aren't that different to where you're just to me you're just kind of paying me 20 points to take a slightly worse version of Latios, at least from an offensive perspective. But then on a defensive perspective, it's better. So I mean, I'm willing to take that trade-off and take the extra 20 points. And it's a Dragon Psychic, so it does have a lot of weaknesses, technically speaking, but it's a legendary, it's got great stats all across the board, and it has great coverage thanks to being both a Dragon and a Psychic type, since they usually get a ton of coverage, and it has nice utility as well. It has the Wish, it has the Defog, it has the Healing Wish, which is a very unique move to a select few mons, generally speaking, and I'm sure it has Tailwind, if I remember correctly. Like, it supports a team, it's a threat on its own with Calm Mind, with all the coverage it has, Z moves, like, it's a great mon all around, so I was glad to see it available, at least for my sake of me taking it. I'm disappointed in Mega Beedrill for not taking it, obviously, but I guess if they wanted other dragons, so be it. I would be more than glad to have a Latios on just about any of my teams, and especially this one being the first mon that I was taking a good hard look at.
Yeah, I agree with it, because just like in my Weedle team, I thought it was just something that was there for just... It was there in the sense of, why is it there? It's like, why is it there? Because it's so good. Yes, it's not as offensive, but it's still really good for what it needs to do, and that it's really good for synergy, that you could pair a lot of stuff with it, and you could still come out with a really good team. So with that, it's like, what you decide to pair with it, what is your tier 2, Jared?
You already know what it is. Looking through tier 2, there's some cool mons in tier 2A, but right now I'm not interested in any of those because I see a mon that 100% should always be drafted. It's Arcanine in tier 2B, because Arcanine does everything. It's offensive, defensive, physically offensive, specially offensive. It's got Intimidate, which is probably one of the best abilities in the game, because that's just basically free bulk in the sense of how it works out. And then it has reliable recovery in Morning Sun. It's got a lot of coverage for whatever odd reason. So it honestly can just run through teams offensively, but I actually much prefer, like, the set I always seem to always run is, because especially I run offensive teams, so Arcanine gets put into a defensive role many times, and honestly, as especially defensive mon, it's really good. Like, as long as you're avoiding water types, generally speaking, if you want to just make it tanky, like max HP, max speed, you can Will-O-Wisp the physical attackers that are slower than you intimidate them already, and then generally speaking, it's typing, like with fire, it's, weak to water, ground, and rock, but it's, rock and ground are generally going to be physical, so you can play around that very easily and just avoid the water types, generally speaking, because while you do have wild charge, if you're offensive, you can go right in, but if you're defensive, you don't want to deal with them, that's fine. Or you can also reduce special attackers with Snarl if you're faster. That's a very viable strategy that I've enjoyed, and Will-O-Wisp is just amazing, and everything about Arcanine is great because it's got such balanced stats. And in terms of the team, I mean, Latios covers both ground and water already, so that's very nice. And then Latios appreciates the bug switch in, and also the ice switch in, and the fairy switch in. So I feel like already that's a solid pair to put together, and they're both amazing mons, so glad to be able to fit Arcanine onto this team. Shame on you, though, for not drafting it, because it's amazing. Feel free to have me.
I 100% agree. It's like when we look at tier 1, tier 2, it's with at least what's left here, or even without what's left there. It's like when we look at these two mons, this just yells out synergy, and that's what these two mons just have with each other. But yes, I could just be going on about everything that Arcanine doesn't like, that Latias likes, that Latias doesn't like, that Arcanine likes. It's like, come on, they just work together so well. It's just something that happens. Like, I'm surprised that neither Latias or Arcanine was taken at all. Really, it's just, what's up with it? Like, just what's up with it?
I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you.
And yes, I do want to clarify to those watching people do care enough. But I was trashing on Arcanine before, and it's just because I knew Jarrett wasn't letting this one go, because he let the one in Beedrill go, I believe, and I'm like, nah, he's not gonna let this one go. So I want to make sure that I get to boil his blood a little bit. So other than that, I think this is a really good pairing together. I think really this is a good start to a tier 1, tier 2 draft if you go directly down. So I mean, the only thing, I have high hopes for tier 3, and what is it?
Okay, well here's where I think the draft starts to get a little more interesting here, and in tier 3, so there's some nice things in tier 3A. There's, I mean, the one thing that I think stood out to both of us obviously was the Alolan Ninetales, and I already had that on the last team that I made, so I am not going to pick the Alolan Ninetales, even though I completely echo the sentiment that it should always be drafted. That's just, Aurora Veil's too good. But looking down to tier 3B, while Tristan pointed out Feraligatr as a water type, I went for a different one, and that is Araquanid. I like Araquanid for the sake of, it's a wall breaker. Like, it's, most people just think of webs, because that's, the new shiny thing it had gotten for Ultra Sun and Moon. However, I think where it retains most of its value is the bug water typing. It's really interesting because the bug aspect of it allows it to resist ground, and the water aspect actually resists ice. So like, at least for my sake, I always draft things that are weak to Mamoswine, the ice and ground coverage, because ice and ground coverage is amazing in general. But this is actually one of the few things that can handle it, and so my team appreciates it resisting both of those. Unfortunately, it does add another rock weakness, but I think the pros outweigh that, being obviously the web's utility is nice. The trapping set with spider web and like toxic just rest, sitting there and taking on whatever it thinks it can switch into liquidations. And in all honesty, it can run Scald too. Like, if you want to burn stuff, that water bubble boost, more than makes up for, really. Its stats being very, I would say, honestly, mediocre for offensively speaking, but water bubble is just such a broken ability, and it can't be burned, so physical liquidations are just destroying mons left and right, and it gets even like Mirror Coat with its solid special defense, and so there's a lot of utility there, as well as just raw power, which, at least at this point, I felt Latios and Arcanine, while they are solid offensively, they aren't going to break teams, but Araquanid probably will, like, it can just do it immediately, versus Latios and Arcanine maybe needing a little more assistance to do so. So, very happy with Araquanid, and a little surprised that it was still left on the board, because Web's users are very valuable and do get drafted quite often.
Honestly, yeah, I agree completely. I want to stress out there for anyone watching that we're not saying that Araquanid is a tier 3, or a round 3 pick, rather. But it is something that we think that should be drafted, and since we're going in the order of our tiers, that it would be an amazing tier 3 pick to have, and to see that it was still there, Jarrett is really confused why. I can understand. But something I do want to say, this is something that matters a lot to me, rather, but Araquanid, 220 attack with Adamant, no item, Z liquidation, does 55 to 64% to an offensive shape. Like, that's not supposed to happen from a water type. That's like unboosted from any kind of stats. Like, it's just, it hit like a truck when you have the right items on it, and when you have the right coverage on it. It hits so hard. I remember in a game I clicked Hydro Vortex with liquidation, and a Roserade switched in, and it got destroyed. Araquanid is not like much water types, and as for an offensive presence, but for just like, it still has the opportunity to set up webs, and that just makes it just as scary, especially for stuff such as Arcanine to open the doors for an offensive set, or a Latios as well. And I'm actually, it's probably not even for those two, as it could be for whatever is in the back. While we're going there, what's your second tier 3?
Okay, this one has the extra caveat of, like Tristan said, you wouldn't draft these, round 3 and round 4. Sharpedo is actually the next tier 3, which I can understand why it didn't get drafted, but I think it is an amazing mod. First off, the speed boost is just really nice. Obviously, Mega Sharpedo's better, but in the grand scheme of things, I guess I would say that technically speaking, Mega Sharpedo costs more. So, for the sake of this team, though, when I was putting it together, Sharpedo did not come to mind immediately. Obviously, at this point, looking at this team, I wasn't thinking, oh, I need another water type immediately. No, but it does help with the ghost weakness of Latios. And I think that Sharpedo, while extremely frail, it's just so easy to many times to wear down a team to the point where, oh, now Sharpedo just wins, or Sharpedo, does the last wearing down of, oh, now another teammate can finish them off. So at least for the sake of this team, it helps provide some speed, because at least I felt that the team wasn't necessarily extremely fast, and I don't want the team to rely on webs. However, webs do come into play, and it even for Sharpedo can help, because now maybe I don't have to protect on that first turn, and maybe I can even risk running no protect just in general. So while Araquanid does offer that web support, I think it just helps everyone in general. Like, no mon likes, or no mon any mon doesn't always appreciates being faster. Like, that's just in general. So Sharpedo, not the strongest, not the bulkiest, but it's a big threat. It got Psychic Fangs in Sun and Moon, and that coverage is actually really nice. Like, it doesn't get the boost that it does for Mega, but you can always give it, Life Orb, you can give it Expert Belt, you can give it those boosting items, because it's gonna die quickly. Like, if it has to actually take a hit, you don't really care about taking Life Orb damage, if we're being honest here. So Sharpedo, I felt like, could help put pressure on Scarfers, as well as just in general can threaten the ghost types that I was kind of fearing with the most of the rest of my squad. I didn't think had as great of a ghost answer, and Sharpedo mainly is a ghost answer plus just cleanup crew.
And yeah, I completely agree with that, because it's like, sometimes teams just need some cleaners, and Sharpedo is exactly that. It's just a big cleaner in the sense of what it can do. I'm a little interested to see that double water type, because now you have some kind of glaring weaknesses that now your Latias has. But I'm pretty sure that you would have covered that in your draft. And really, I like that you have a dark type. It's like, it's just something that is there, and it's just something that's almost needed in League format today. And sure, it doesn't get knocked off, but still has the power to be mixed at least. And it will do good enough as whatever you need it to do in a specific matchup. And so with that, I want to see how you patch up what you think you're missing here in your tier 4.
Well, when I was looking at tier 2 earlier, I did see Florges as something that I would appreciate on this team. However, I didn't have the points for Florges based off of everything else I was intending to take. So thankfully, though, in tier 4, there's budget Florges in Aromatisse, which I actually really like it. I know a lot of people kind of just think it's bad, and it's not. I know it's not the greatest wish passer, but I think if you in the right matchups, it really can shine. And this gen, it actually, or I don't even know if it was just this gen, but it might have been Ultra, brought it a Nasty Plot. And so that's actually an interesting thing, because it can Trick Room, and Nasty Plot on its own becoming a huge threat, or just Trick Room support for the rest of the team, as well as it has screens, and it's what you expect from a cleric. It has the aromatherapy, it has the wish, so it's really, I think, a nice mon. It cannot get taunted because of whatever the Sweet Veil or whatever ability it is. I don't even remember what it's called, but it cannot get taunted, cannot get infatuated, can't get encored. So I mean, to me, that's amazing. That's it. A mon that is generally going to be support that can't get taunted, like, that's amazing. Like, you can literally always bank on being able to get off those moves and not having to fear any taunt mons that can generally shut down a lot of support mons. So I'm really pleased to be able to add that to the team, and I can understand why it wouldn't get drafted. In the tier 4 and 5, I can, it's kind of just filling needs. So if no one needed that, and I guess really no one needed it if Florges also didn't get taken, then they wanted something else in their fairy, that's fine. But I think Aromatisse is a very quality mon in tier 4 personally, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And I think for this team, it is just the ultimate support, and helps, at least, Dragon weakness, not there anymore, and I think later down the road it kind of covers more, but obviously for Sharpedo has a million weaknesses, so fighting and bug both get covered, and so I think that Aromatisse kind of just rounds out typings and helps kind of start a somewhat defensive backbone. I won't say this team is fully balanced or anything like that, but it's definitely not as offensive as the other team I built, so it is a little more balanced, and so I felt with that in mind, I needed some nice cleric support, and I feel like that's great from Aromatisse.
No, yeah, I agree with you with most of the stuff you're saying. It's like kind of what you said before. We're not we're not just choosing the best mons out of each tier that people left. We're trying to make the best team for what we feel is what we're getting. So it's like, yes, Aromatisse is not the best fairy out there, but it's the fairy that Garrett felt best fit him, and it works out for him, and he likes it there. So it's like you can't really take it away from anything that I do, because again, it has the options to support the team like no one else on the team right now. Like, and on top of that, Trick Room support, you could end up helping out that Araquanid with it. So it's like, it's not just a single Trick Room and only supports itself. It can support other mons with it, especially with that Trick Room. And then the Wishes help as well with it. So I think it was a really nice pick to have in Tier 4. What about Tier 5?
Tier 5. So, I said that I got budget Florges earlier. Well, I'm also taking another, at least in my mind, a budget mon of a mon that is in a higher tier, and that's budget Tangrowth, which is just its evolution being Tangela, which I personally think it should be drafted. Like, if you don't have a grass type and you're like, I don't know what to do, if you need the ground weakness to be patched up, which I felt like just would be nice overall for my team, Tangela is always a solid mon. It's bulkier on the defensive side than Tangrowth when you factor in the Eviolite, as well as it gets, its Assault Vest, as Tangrowth usually likes to run, but in addition to boosting its defense, so it usually can be bulkier than even Tangrowth, and the only thing you're missing out from Tangrowth is that it's not as good physically offensively, and then obviously the item restriction. So yes, you're pretty much always gonna run Eviolite, except that actually Tangela has a solid special attack, which sounds surprising for a mon that's not even fully evolved, but it's at least base 100 if I recall correctly, so I would advocate even for Specs Tangela, because it's already pretty bulky as it is. Obviously with the Eviolite it's just impressive fashion, but Tangela is definitely, I think, a huge threat. It has pretty much all the coverage that Tangrowth gets, barring a few things, and for the most part you're not going to use the physical coverage that it gets, but you don't really need it most of the time. If you want a healing move, it gets its synthesis, but it also still has regenerator, so you don't even usually have to worry about that. And then it has Leech Seed, like many grass types desire, and it's got the strong special attack to support, because it has Focus Blast, it has like Ancient Power, it's got some interesting, I think it even has Sludge Bomb, it's got actually a solid amount of coverage for a just pure grass type that you wouldn't expect, and so I love Tangela. I don't draft it as often as I'd like, because in theory I always am like, oh well, if I need a grass type, I'm just gonna grab Tangela in tier 5 anyway. I go into drafts a lot of times like that, and then I'll change my plan as it goes on, but Tangela, definitely solid mon. Again, I can understand why it's not drafted, however, I think it is probably one of the better tier 5 mons, and so it should be drafted a lot of times. I think it definitely should be drafted many times, but Specs Tangela, don't forget it. But Eviolite Tangela, very reliable, especially defensive and physically defensive.
I think the biggest thing that your team shouts right now, when we look at the team in a synergetic way, when we look at the team as a whole, I think the only thing I think is underrated, because I think all these mons are just underrated in how they're placed and stuff. I think they have probably the right to put them in the tiers that they are, but we see stuff like Araquanid, Sharpedo, Aromatisse, Tangela. not getting as much love as they probably should. And it's like, do I blame them? Not exactly, but it's like these Mons are definitely getting love from you, and I appreciate that. Yeah, no, that's really all I really have to say about it. Tangela is a great Mon. Probably not my preferred tier 5, or not tier 5 rather, but my preferred grass type. So with that, I mean, it's not my choice, it's Jarrett, and I support his choice to it. And so why not? I will support him with his other picks and his past picks as well, such as his mega pick. What do you got, my dude?
Well, you will definitely support this pick, but I did want to have. I was looking at Mega Aerodactyl very much at first. That was a mon I wanted to build around at first, and then I also thought about Mega Venusaur because I've actually noticed throughout all of these that I don't even know if anyone drafted Mega Venusaur across all of the leagues, which I found surprising, at least because I think it's an amazing mon, but it's one that I have not used as much as I would have liked. But neither of those ended up being on the team. Instead, though, we have Mega Aggron.
There we go.
Which, yes, Tristan has sprouted love for Mega Aggron. I have used it maybe only once or twice, but I felt like in this team it made a lot of sense because I do have a couple rock weaknesses here and no resist so far, so that's easy rock switch in Mega Aggron. And in addition, I didn't really have any hazard setters, so there you go, Mega Aggron. I didn't have a steel type yet. Mega Aggron is just filling a lot of roles, and I have that wish support from Latios and Aromatisse to help keep it healthy as possible, as well as cover its weaknesses being ground, fighting, fire, which I think all of those are resisted by Latios on its own. So I felt like this was a solid pick for this team especially, but I think Mega Aggron's really good just in general. It's a very solid defensive Mega, which I feel like a lot of times I'm always leaning towards offensive Megas, and so I do like the change of pace with a Mega Aggron being that defensive Mega, but that can also be offensive. Like, don't even forget about that coverage is amazing, and its attack stat is also quite amazing. So Mega Aggron here, I feel like, is another Gloomon to a big defensive core that I'm kind of building with. I have Aromatisse, Tangela, and Mega Aggron that are going to typically be defensive, but we also have the Latios and Arcanine, and honestly the Araquanid, like everything but Sharpedo, can be pretty defensive at this point, and I like that flexibility with this team because I'm more balanced rather than the just hyper offense, more or less, that I was choosing with the team for Kakuna. So Mega Aggron, a very fitting mon, I think, for the sake of a more balanced approach.
And yeah, really, if you watch the Beedrill video, you know my love for Mega Aggron. It has such good synergy, especially with the team that Garrett has right now, especially with that kind of stuff, such with Latios and Aromatisse to get it what it needs. And then on top of that, you look at even Arachnid, who will take the usual, like, the water attacks that don't want to, the scalds that Mega Aggron don't want to take because burn chance. You have stuff like, what else could be? Like, you have Torpedo for an offensive presence in terms of trying to get rid of, trying to get rid of the stuff such as fire types and fighting type, or not fighting types, but ground types. And even then, fighting types, you have Latias, you have Arcanine, you have Aromatisse. You have the team to support it. I kind of like the Aggron fit better here than I did in my own team last time. It's just because you have the healing support from Latias and Aromatisse mostly.
Yeah, I felt like that was pretty necessary to making sure it stays healthy, as well as the rest of my team. But I have, Regenerator on Tangela as well, and Morning Sun. Latios has the Roost, so I'm not going to necessarily be dependent on the Wish support from Aromatisse. That's what made me, feel more comfortable with picking it. And then in addition, well, hey, then my wishes can mostly focus on Mega Aggron. And that's, if anyone's faced a Mega Aggron, you understand, hey, if that gets a wish, you're so deflated because it probably already took enough effort to get it weakened in the first place.
And really, one of the better things about Aggron in this is that it gets you 20 more points, so you could use free points. So what did you use for free?
Well, since I feel like I had my defensive, backbone pretty much covered, my free points are pretty much all offense. And to start off the offense here, since I have a good amount of points, I actually went for Circuitry in Tier 2A. Okay. I personally have never drafted it, but I want to say that it should be really good based on just, theory modding, and obviously the speed is the one thing that it's, missing, generally speaking, because it has the massive special attack to where it literally can only boost its special attack with Beast Boost, and it gets Tail Glow, which seems so unnecessary, but it can be a solid Z user just to add the extra strength to its coverage moves, or the ever so deadly 60% Z Hypnosis. And so, I'm sure with this team I'd be willing to roll the dice a couple times and say, hey, 60% chance to just put him to sleep and maybe just win? Yes, please. So, Circuitry, while it's also provides a flying resist along with Mega Aggron, because I felt like honestly, flying types are pretty dang good, like with the fact that rock types are, and steel types are going to be the main things that switch into it, because most electric types aren't that bulky, but Circuitry actually has some decent bulk. And that's something I'd be willing to switch into a flying type. And so,
Defensive Circuitry.
Okay, no, not that. Well, maybe, but I'd have to try it. But I mean, I use things in some unconventional ways at times, and that's the fun of this, is being able to use them, in ways you may not expect. And so, I felt like Circuitry can be a very good mon. Since its speed was lacking, Araquanid's webs can help, get over that, and its coverage is great, its power is amazing, so it's gonna break, which I didn't really have a whole lot of breaking potential beyond the not the Arcanine, the Araquanid at this time. Well, Arcanine can't wall break, but it does everything. So I felt that now that I have a nice special wall breaker and Circuitry being a mon that, while it, obviously ground is immune, it has the Energy Ball, the Grass Knot, so it generally speaking isn't afraid of ground types. And so I felt this was the time to use it because of those extra 20 points. I definitely felt like I could afford it, as well as still have 3 other quality mons.
And yeah, that's what it's kind of about. It's trying to make the best team you got. And something that Circuitry also gave you is Volt Switch Initiative. And that's something that is very important on a team. And it's something where now you don't have to predict as hard. If you have a slower mon in front of your Circuitry, you can Volt Switch rather than trying to predict a hard switch, and you have to hard switch yourself. And so being able to Volt Switch only helps you out so much. And even then, it's like hard switching isn't that big of a problem with your team when you have the Wish support, when you have the Regenerator support that you do have. And so I like what you got. I like the Circuitry pick. I thought with the power, I'm like, okay, it's Terrakion coming around. What? But nope, I was wrong. You led me a different path, and you put the Circuitry. And then I'm like, okay, so now I'm a little bit excited. What's your next free pick?
Well, okay, I will clarify. You are actually not wrong. The next free pick is Terrakion. Because, like I said, I kind of accumulated a bunch of extra points in the sense that I got the extra from Mega Aggron. All my tier 1s through 3s are actually Bs. So, I actually have, an extra 20 points basically for 5 different mons. So I have a lot of points going, and Terrakion is a mon that I love personally. I understand why it doesn't get drafted sometimes, in the sense that it can be hard to fit on a team if you're trying to think of the typing synergy, at least defensively, but it's an offensive mon, so I usually don't care too much about that. At least, with my usual team being more offensive with less of a defensive backbone. However, now that I have a defensive backbone to cover its weaknesses, Terrakion just feels even better. And it can be a wall breaker, it can be a great, just cleanup crew like Sharpedo. Web support makes it even more of a threat, because then I could even potentially run the Adamant Natures instead. It has the Sword Stance, it has the Rock Polish, it does give me another rocker, which I do not have a lot at this point, so, Mega Aggron being the only one I believe so far, Terrakion being a nice option for rocks, as well as just a solid fighting type, rock type, since I mentioned the flying resist of Xurkitree, because the rock type I picked doesn't actually resist flying, so I felt like those really helped. I do pick up some more ground weakness with the last 3 mons I have picked. However, that's why I stressed the Araquanid and the Latios, as well as the Tangela, all being able to take on ground type attacks. So I'm not too concerned with that, and Mega Aggron, in all honesty, can take ground type attacks if it needs to, other than like very few special earth powers in the game. So I felt like Terrakion would have a lot of room to succeed, and also gave me some extra speed because I don't want to be too reliant on those sticky webs, although it does take very much advantage of that sticky web.
Oh yeah, no, Terrakion is just a dominant mon in the league. It's like, whether you draft it or not, it's like, that it's gonna be a dominant Pokemon. If it's there, then I don't know. Someone done messed up. It might not have been you. It might not have been the guy that drafted before you or after you, but someone done messed up. You know what I mean? Just saying. And it's like, when I look at it, it's just so dominant, and it's such a great fighting type. It's a great rock type. It has the coverage it needs, because it's like close combat EQ stonage is all it really needs. Like, it's just so hard. It sets up. It has rocks for you. It's really just that kind of good Pokemon that anyone would love to have on their team. And I'm a little surprised to see it there, to be honest. But you picked it up. That's really good. You got a kind of a bit of ground weakness, but I'm just saying Mega Aggron eats those, okay? Just saying. And then, so, if I'm guessing that you patched up your ground weakness that you do say that you have in your next 1 or 2 free picks. Is that true?
Yes, I do actually. The next pick is a ground immunity, because I actually at this point don't even have a flying type, and I also do not have a ground type, and so for that, I'm actually gonna take Landorus.
Ooh.
And Landorus here, while it's not, the intimidating Therian form, Landorus Incarnate is still, I feel, just as viable. Obviously, not quite as good if it's being restricted from having Dank Force, but it still has Sand Force, so that's useful in many aspects. But I didn't feel like running a Sand team with this one, because I don't think Landorus needs it, necessarily. I feel that instead, it's amazing coverage options, it's natural, just solid stats all around. It can be physical, it can be special, it has U-turn for momentum, it has another, now, rocks user for me, and I felt like I wasn't too weak to ice or water by any means with the team I had, so I think now you're starting to see maybe why I have the double water type, available to me, because I have one that can function at least, by switching in, but I think it also just supports the rest of the team having the double water, although an unconventional duo of water. But Landorus, normally I do like to have 2 ground types when I have one that's a ×4 weakness. I will spoil that I do not in this one. I did not pick up another ground type, but I felt like this ground type was the best one available and it's setup options galore with Sword Stance, Rock Polish, Calm Mind. The coverage is all there to support those, and it even gives me another defogger, which I do not have that much in the way of hazard removal at this point, because I believe it's just Landorus and Latios, but I feel like this team isn't Rock's weak, so I'm not too concerned with it. It has a few Rock weak Mons, but I think it's something it's you could play around with, and especially considering the bulk I have and the Wish support that it can provide, and maybe even Healing Wish from Latios, I think that it's something that can be overcame quite easily and just allows these Mons, including Landorus, be the powerhouses they can be.
And yeah, I kind of agree with you on most of what you just said. Yeah, is that your Rock week, you only have 2 Mons that resist the Stealth Rock switching, but then like that kind of stuff doesn't completely matter when you have stuff like Latios and Aromatisse passing around wishes around. So it's like, that's okay. But then like we have to move on to the actual big name here, which is Landorus. Landorus is just one of those things that it doesn't need sheer force. It does not need a sand team. Its speed is 101. That's really good. It has setup options, which is really good. It has the right coverage, which is really good. Like, it's a really dominant Mon, even without the sand team to help it out. And it's like the sand team or the real ability. It's this Mon will be able to just be able to put in work. And it's something that I wanted to try out. I don't know if I wanted to do it with the sand team or not. But I don't think that it actually needs either. That it's something that if I need a ground immunity or a ground type in general, that I could grab this and I could do a lot of work with it. And especially it gives you a Volt turn aspect. It finishes that for you so that you're actually okay.
Yeah, this team definitely is lacking in some of those momentum grabbers, but I do have a couple that I think are very strong, and they're huge threats in their own right. So I think that can just help me, because they will force switches, and if I don't want to predict, I won't always have to, and that's always a nice luxury, especially with this type of team that has, I feel at least, a nice balance to it, so that I'm not having to offensively just crazy predict, nor am I struggling to switch in things. So I think this just helps round out the offense in a very nice way, because I mean, ground typing is just amazing on its own. If I want to use Z moves, Landorus is a great Z move user, and so ground plus flying coverage is hard to beat. So I felt like getting both in one was very awesome.
Yeah, really, it really does. It really helped out your team in a couple different aspects there. And something that really resonated was that it helps round out your team. Because I think it helps round out kind of your offensive, or the offensive aspect of your team that you really needed. And because ground is such a spammable type that you could just keep on clicking Earth Power, Earthquake, and you're going to do some damage. Like, you have the coverage with Landorus, it just really helps out your team offensive aspect, and it's really nice. But talking about rounding out, let's round out your team. What's that last free pick?
Last one, since I did use quite a bit of points with Xurkitree, Terrakion, and Landorus, I believe I only had 40 points left, and that's Tier 5A, which there are some good Mons in there. Again, mainly niche Mons, but I feel like I got a solid one. And that one is actually one that I love a lot. It's Tauros. Tauros here, it's got the base 110 speed. It's got, I assume, at least base 100 attack. Not sure off the top of my head, but it gets Sheer Force. It gets Intimidate. And both those abilities are extremely useful, as well as it now gets Body Slam through the gold, the Virtual Console, Gold, Silver, Crystal, bringing those into Sun and Moon, and thus you don't have to run Rock Climb and miss that. Instead, you can hit Body Slams with Sheer Force to be very strong, as well as just the coverage it gets is amazing because it's a normal type. It gets Rock Slide, it gets Earthquake, it gets Iron Head. It's just, it gets what you need for a normal type, considering, I mean, normal type generally is pretty spammable, and then you have, you know, Rock and your Seal and your Ghost types. It gets Pursuit, which is a very nice thing, so it can be a Ghost switch-in as well as, you know, Pursuit trapping, and it gets just a plethora of good moves, including, its special attack is bad. You don't have to look, it's bad. I know, but it gets Ice Beam and Fire Blast, which takes on, you know, a lot of those 4x weaknesses. So you can take advantage of the fact that it gets those, because a lot of those physically defensive mons that are 4x weak to Ice or Fire will get blown back by a Life Orb, Sheer Force, Tauros. Because Life Orb plus Sheer Force is amazing, and despite its terrible special attack, if you're exploiting a times 4 weakness, it really comes in clutch. And if you really want to be crazy, you could probably even run Workup and boost that special attack. But generally speaking, Tauros, it's in my opinion, a solid revenge killer. It can break walls if you have the right, you know, type coverage, which it does get so many good coverage moves because it's a normal type. They give freaking everything to normal types, and it's a solid speed, and it's not bulky, but it's not just frail. It's a solid in between, and so I felt Tauros was a really nice way to round out. And I said earlier I'm kind of iffy on ghost types because my dark type is Sharpedo, so it's, you know, not gonna really switch in to too many ghost types. So I now have Tauros as I feel more reliable switch in, but for the most part, it's just going to be able to add to my speed and add more physical prowess, as my team, I feel, has now a really solid balance of physical and special attacking, and now has a more reliable way to handle if webs are not up.
That is true. Everything you said is just true there. Like, it could be offensive, it could be a bit bulky, like it has Intimidate, which, like, it could help your whole team, not just your only Tauros. It really just has a lot of great stuff that it can do. That special attack is pitiful, but with Life Orb Shield First, it is really good. And you could blow back those 4x weaknesses you were talking about, because you just have the coverage for it. And really, it's just, I think it works as last mon because it gives you another fast mon. It gives you something that just has direct power when you need it, and I think it fits really nice with their team surrounded out.
Yeah, I feel like it's another mon that can function as, hey, if I wear you down, then it can help clean up, or it can help do the wearing down. And I mean, that's all you can really ask from an offensive mon, especially, you know, when I'm trying to pick with 40 points left. I feel like this is great value for where it's at. I like Tauros just in general as a tier 5 pick. I would advocate it for many teams, and I think it's,
and, you know, just saying, you wouldn't have been able to get it unless you did make Agron the greatest.
Yeah, exactly. I got the extra points where I could, and I think, and that really, like, I feel like if you know, looking at my team going from tier 1 to tier 5, you know, and then including the Mega, you're like, okay, this is a weird ass team that a lot of, you were saying, you know, underrated mons, and, you know, not anything that strikes, you know, fear necessarily when you just look at it. But that's because I was hoarding all my points to then unleash them with the threats of Circuitry, Terrakion, and Landorus. And so to be able to afford them, I did have to concede with getting a tier 5, but I feel like it's a very solid tier 5.
Yeah, it is indeed. I really think that this team would be able to do something. Like, it could get you maybe like 1 win in Mega Beedrill. And it's like, just kidding. But you know, with that, I'm sure that Jared is open to throwing out that challenge to anybody from Mega Beedrill.
Yes, of course. I would be very willing to fight with this team. I think it's a very cool looking team. It's definitely something that I have never drafted a team quite like this, because I think it's got a lot of underrated mons like Tristan iterated, as well as just I usually pick offensive teams, but this has I feel a nice balance between the offense and defense, and a lot of versatility amongst the mons. So I would be more than happy to fight anyone in Mega Beedrill with this team if they so desired. But I think that's where
I think that rounds up.
yeah, I think that's a good stopping point for. We have been pumping these out.
For about 5 hours now, to be honest.
I took forever making the teams, so I was.
Hey, let's see.
I legitimately wanted to make good teams, and obviously Tristan felt the same
we
way.
both
So
did.
I feel like we made 4 solid teams in total. 2 each that we are very willing to use against anyone, and I think these are teams that could very much contend within each of the divisions of the Hive, and I think it shows the many possibilities that the tier list of the Hive gives you, especially when we're picking basically a 17th team within each of these divisions. So I think that in general there's 807 Pokemon or something like that, so there's plenty of good ones all around, and I think I'm glad that we got to talk about some of them that maybe aren't as talked about, and especially, they weren't even drafted, so if anyone's doing a draft recap or analysis, they're not talking about these mons nearly as much as we feel maybe they should be, so always nice to give those a spotlight. But with that, I think
that's all we have.
I think that's a good stopping point.
We've been working to build team like 3 o'clock today. Started recording at 6 o'clock or so. It's like we've been putting in the work, and now our best of the rest series for a Hive edition has been closed.
Yes, this is
thank you to anybody who definitely watched this. This was something that I threw out to Jarrett as an idea, and he thought it was really good, and so to be able to do this with him was really great. So thank you for having me here, Jarrett.
Yes, of course. I appreciate having you as part of the fight for the invitation, and and
fight for the invite.
Fight for the invite. Whatever. I messed it up. Whatever. It's it's in the description correctly. So you know what, I'm.
That's why I came up with the names.
Yes, he came up with the name in the first one. Best of the rest. This is something that I actually want to probably do for other leagues, especially the IPA being both where you can see both Tristan and I a part of it, as well as helping obviously run it as part of the admin staff. So definitely expect, if you're someone that just watches a bunch of my videos on the channel, don't know if that even exists, but this series will come back. I promise that. But for the Hive, we have finished, and I'm glad to say we are finished, and thank you for the honey.
For the honey. All
for the honey. But I think the desire for honey has inspired a cool idea, so with that though, you can finally say bye, and we can put this to rest.
See you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Yes. Hopefully Tristan won't have to just draft a team from the Hive of the scraps. Instead, he'll actually be able to maybe even draft a Hive team, and maybe that's a preview of what's to come. But
maybe the future.
Thank you to anyone who's watched these.
17th team as our
No, it's for season 5, where we want Tristan in the Hive. So thank you for watching.